One day, Nag Mahashaya and others were talking about Sri Ramakrishna at Girish Babu's house, when Swami Niranjanananda, who was present there, said, "Well, sir, our master used to say that one who thinks himself mean and wretched becomes actually so ultimately. Why then do you always think yourself most low and degraded?" Nag Mahashaya replied, "Ah, I see with my own eyes that I am so low and degraded. How can I think that I am Shiva?" "You can think like that. Girish Babu can say he is Shiva. You have got such great devotion for the Lord. Where is such devotion in me? If you all help me, if Thakur grants me grace, my life will be blessed." There was such a ring of sincere humility in those words of Nag Mahashaya that Swami Niranjanananda could neither contradict him nor raise any discussion. Referring to this incident, Girish Babu said, "If a man be sincere and if really all idea of egotism has vanished from him, he attains to the state of Nag Mahashaya. The earth becomes consecrated by the very touch of the feet of such great men." That day, sitting in his house, Nag Mahashaya was condemning himself before some gentlemen for his own shortcomings and was calling himself as a heap of sins and the worm of worms. Suddenly, he remembered the words of Swami Niranjanananda and said, "Only this day I heard at Girish Babu's that one who thinks himself a degraded worm becomes like that, and if one thinks himself Shiva, one becomes Shiva. Then what will become of me?" After a pause, he again said, "No, there cannot be any harm in speaking the truth that I am really a worm, and it does not matter much to call a worm by its own name. It is not wrong to speak the truth. Through the grace of my master and the grace of you all and Girish Babu, by speaking the truth, I shall never stray away into the path of the untrue." So saying, he bowed down before all. Then he made obeisance to Sri Ramakrishna. He remained silent for some time and again spoke, "When I have the attachment to this body, this cage of bone and flesh, how can I boast that I am Shiva? Girish Babu is a mighty hero, the Bhairava himself. He can say he is Shiva." He then made his obeisance, referring to Girish Babu. "I am so low, what can I do for you to smoke?" So saying, he sat down to serve them with chillums of tobacco. Sri Navagopal Ghosh of the village Ramakrishnapur, a great devotee of the Master, celebrated with great pomp the anniversary of Sri Ramakrishna. Babu Upendranath Mukherjee, the proprietor of the Basumati, a Bengali weekly, invited Nag Mahashaya for the celebration. On the morning of the anniversary day, Nag Mahashaya went to Upen Babu's at Ahiritola. A carriage was hired, but Nag Mahashaya expressed his desire to go on foot. Upen Babu knew that Nag Mahashaya could not bear the sight of the horses being whipped. Accordingly, he instructed the coachman particularly not to whip the horses, and after much entreaty, Nag Mahashaya was made to get into the carriage. When they reached the destination, Nag Mahashaya got down and prostrated before Navagopal Babu. On entering the house, he stood in a corner of the hall and began to fan the guests. The request of Navagopal Babu and all the assembled gentlemen to the contrary could not stop him. The village of Ramakrishnapur resounded incessantly with the name of Sri Ramakrishna. The devotees were all beside themselves with the joy of the festivity and the ecstasy of Sankirtanam. But Nag Mahashaya, born as if to serve the devotees of the Lord, had no other business but to serve them. In a corner he stood continually waving the fan. Then, when the devotees went to take prasadam, he followed them with folded palms, but did not sit in the row. At the request of all, he took only a grain of prasadam. All gazed at him with astonishment. While returning to Calcutta, Nag Mahashaya could not be persuaded by any means to get into the carriage. Consequently, they all set out on foot. On their way, Nag Mahashaya remarked that Sri Ramakrishna Deva used to say that Navagopal Babu's wife was born of Vidya Prakriti, and those who considered these devotees as mere human beings were no better than beasts. A few days later, Nag Mahashaya went back to his native village, and this was his last visit to Calcutta. After the final disappearance of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, when Nag Mahashaya went to his native village, he first thought of erecting a cottage for himself in a secluded place and living there all alone. As his wife learnt of his intention, she said, "I have never troubled you for anything, nor shall I do so at any time. Then why should you live apart?" Relying on the assurance given by his faithful wife, Nag Mahashaya continued to live in the same house with his family. But though he lived in the house, he kept up the spirit of renunciation all through his life. His wife says, "No change or weakness of flesh could be noticed in his person even for a moment." Taking the name of Sri Ramakrishna, he trampled underfoot all animal propensities. He lived in the midst of fire, but his body was not even slightly scorched. Two people from his preceptor's family once came to his house at Devbhog. One of them was a devotee. His name was Naveen Chandra Bhattacharya. At the earnest request of Deen Dayal, he pressed Nag Mahashaya to live with his wife and beget an issue in fulfillment of their householder's duty to perpetuate his line. When he heard this, he fell down in a swoon and got wounds all over his body. After a time, he said to the devotee, "You come from our preceptor's family and are yourself a devotee. Indeed, it is most unbecoming of you to command me to do such an unworthy thing." With this, he began to strike his head with a piece of brick lying close by till it cut his forehead, and the wound bled profusely. The devotee was sorry and retracted his order. Nag Mahashaya felt relieved and took the dust off his feet. Once Deen Dayal rebuked Nag Mahashaya, saying, How will you provide yourself with food and raiment? Upon this he replied, Father, you need not be anxious on that account. The trees are abundant with tender leaves. I have never looked upon any woman with carnal desires in my life. I am just the same as when I came out of my mother's womb. I need nothing to put on. Deen Dayal would often rebuke Nag Mahashaya, his only son, for his non-attachment to his worldly duties. One day, in the course of conversation, there arose an altercation between the father and the son. Nag Mahashaya suddenly became excited and said, I never knew any woman in my life, nor have I any lust. I have nothing to do with this world. Then with the words, Naham, Naham, not I, he threw away his clothes and walked out nude from his house. His wife began to weep. Finding her aggrieved, a devotee of Nag Mahashaya brought him back to the house.